Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We have prepared a very important panel discussion on the legal barriers to equitable employment for justice impacted individuals. The first part of this event will consist of moderated questions to our distinguished panelists. The second part of the event will be a Q&A session with the audience. Therefore, as you are listening to the panelists, please put any questions you may have on the chat. We will be using those questions during our Q&A session. We will try our best to get as many as possible answered. This event is being sponsored by a grant from the Checker Foundation, so thank you to our sponsors. At this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Topeka K. Sam, founder and CEO of the Ladies of Hope Ministries. Dr. Sam is a passionate champion for the dignity, decriminalization, and decarceration of women and girls. As a founder of the CEO and the Ladies of Hope Ministries, co-founder of CVO of MyFresh.com, president of TKS Ventures, Epic Health, Epic Living Detroit, and Faces Voices, Inc., she stands a catalyst for positive transformation. Since her release from federal prison in 2015, she has earned recognition as a Soros Justice Advocate Fellow and received a full and unconditional presidential pardon for her dedication to empowering women in 2020. Notable accolades include board positions at organizations like the Marshall Project, Operation Restoration, and United Justice Coalition. In addition, she received the first Social Impact Award from Google.org, which highlights her significant contributions. Beyond advocacy, Dr. Sam has ventured into media, hosting a show on SiriusXM, and currently serving as an executive producer for various TV and film projects. Dr. Sam is a relentless force in transforming lives, advocating for social justice, and inspiring change. Dr. Sam.
Thank you so much, Judith, for that incredible introduction. And thank you all for joining us for the first in a series that we'll be doing. So please stay tuned. And welcome to this particular panel, which is the legal barriers to equitable employment, a roundtable discussion. And so why are we here and what is the problem? Close to 80 million people, that's 1 in 3 adults in the United States, have an arrest or a criminal record. And almost 1/3 are women. 44% of people remain unemployed after 1 year of being released. 75% of women who are impacted by incarceration are women of color and unemployed. These job seekers are on the sidelines, and businesses are missing out on huge, talented, and dedicated individuals. Businesses and HR leaders are in a strong position to be a part of the solution. Yet what we're finding in the field is that that's actually not happening. And that's why this conversation is so critical. The purpose of this event is through the Ladies of Hope Ministries, our program Pathways for Equity. We aim to address the problem by providing information through roundtable discussions, increasing awareness, and collaborating on solutions. Our goal is to open doors to meaningful careers by working with employers who are committed to fair chance hiring to address the multiple challenges faced by women with a criminal background. Today, we will hear from expert panelists on ways that key legal stakeholders can work together to prepare returning individuals for equitable employment opportunities. Now, I'm going to introduce our guests, and I'm going to give you a little bit about who they are, what they do, and where they're from. Our first panelist is Ken Oliver, Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility and Executive Director of Checker.org. Ken is a leading advocate for reshaping the future of the workplace with a background in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and justice. Ken's mission is to provide pathways to sustainable employment for the 80 million Americans with arrest and criminal records. His remarkable journey from life in prison to influential leadership showcases his commitment to change. Ken has been recognized in publications like Newsweek and Forbes. He actively contributes to narrative and systems change, focusing on fair chance employment, DEIJ, and justice-impacted economic mobility. As a board member for various organizations, including the Last Mile, and Turning Basin Labs, Ken plays a crucial role in shaping the future of the workplace and social impact nationwide. Thank you, Ken, for being here. Our second panelist is Senior Judge Ann Aiken, U.S. District Court Judge for District of Oregon. Senior Judge Ann Aiken brings over 30 years of judicial experience. Serving on the bench since 1998, she presided over complex civil and criminal trials, including cases including the USA Patriot Act, water rights, environmental issues, intellectual property, and employment discrimination. Committed to alternative dispute resolution, she has a strong background in settlement and a dedication to reentry programs, facilitating criminal offender reentry into the community. Beyond the courtroom, Judge Aiken is recognized for her contributions to legal innovation, technology, and public safety. Her honors include the 2015 Law Advocacy and Policy Award from Portland State University Center for Women's Leadership and the 2005 Oregon Women Lawyers Justice Betty Roberts Award. Senior Judge Aiken's legacy extends beyond the courtroom to her advocacy for women in the legal profession and the community. Thank you so much, Judge Aiken. Our third panelist is Keto Bess, Chief U.S. Probation Officer, U.S. Probation and Pretrial Services in Minnesota. Chief Keto Bess has over 20 years of community corrections experience. Chief Bess began his federal career in 2001 and has committed to quality service. He served in various roles, including as Chief of the Eastern District of Louisiana. Chief Bess' leadership in EDLA established the Rise and Recover Reentry Corps program, expanded workforce development, and increased technology use. Recognized with the Daniel B. Ryan Award, he continued his trajectory in Minnesota, hosting the Reentry Court Commencement Training Program and enhancing workforce development initiatives. A champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, Chief Bess produced videos and online modules, hosting virtual conferences, contributing to national recruitment efforts, and fostering ongoing professional development. We're so grateful to have you, Chief Bess. Our fourth panelist is Jessica Jackson, Chief Advocacy and Operations Officer at Reform Alliance. As a distinguished human rights attorney and bipartisan leader with a relentless commitment to public safety and criminal justice reform, Jessica has played a pivotal role in passing significant reforms by collaborating across public, private, and social sectors. As the former national director of Cut 50, she established one of the country's first bipartisan criminal justice reform organizations, empowering formerly incarcerated individuals for policy change campaigns. In 2018, Jessica led the successful passage of the Federal First Step Act, a landmark criminal justice reform bill hailed as, quote, the most substantial in a generation, end quote, by the New York Times. At Reform Alliance, she continues to drive impactful campaigns resulting in 18 bipartisan bills across 11 states and providing pathways for over 800,000 individuals to exit the criminal justice system. Jessica's strategic leadership positions her as a key advocate for positive change in the realms of public safety and criminal justice reform. Thank you, Jessica, for always answering our calls.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And finally, our fifth panelist is Sheena Mead, CEO of the Clean Slate Initiative. Sheena is a transformative leader, empowering the disenfranchised through record relief automation. Under her guidance, the Clean Slate Initiative championed bipartisan policies for nationwide automatic clearance of eligible arrest and conviction records, securing legislation that has impacted over 15 million people. CSI was recognized by the Audacious Project in 2023, receiving a landmark financial commitment. Prior to leading CSI, Sheena played a pivotal role as the first organizing director of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition and senior advisor to the successful Second Chances Amendment 4 campaign, restoring rights to 1.4 million people in Florida. Her influence extends to the boards of Live Free USA and Florida Coalition on Black Civic Engagement. Her bipartisan approach unites political figures, addresses critical justice issues, while her grassroots organizing has fueled successful voter registration drives. Thank you so much, Sheena, for being here with us. And so I'm going to take a pause because that was a whole lot to say. But I had to say each and every word just so everyone knows exactly who we have, why they're here, because they are leaders and experts in the field. And I am ready for this conversation. But please remember, put any questions that you have in the chat. We will get to what we can. And afterwards, we'll answer what we can based on who signed up with registration. So my first question is going to go to Ken Oliver. Ken, this is around systemic barriers. In your position at Checker, what are the most significant barriers you have seen in the background process that prevent justice-impacted individuals from successfully reintegrating into the workforce? And from your personal experience, did you have to overcome any of these systemic barriers?
Thank you for that, Dr. Sam. First, before I answer that question, I just want to say how humbled and honored I am to be here with such esteemed guests and voices. And so really appreciate you inviting me to lend to this conversation. In reference to what's wrong with the background check process that prevents folks from entering back into the workforce, it's quite frankly the background check, right? And so background checks historically have been used for tools of exclusion. And a lot of my friends across the country in the space, the advocacy space, I'm a former organizer out here in California and policy director. They asked me, Ken, why would you go to work for a background check company, right? And what's interesting about that decision that I made was that Checker, as a background check company, hires more formerly incarcerated people than any other tech company in the country. We have 5% of our workforce, from engineers to policy individuals to people on go-to-market sales, marketing, you name it, HR, talent recruitment. We have people who've gotten out of prison that work here. So that was one consideration. The second consideration was the stage and the sheer amount of customers and businesses that they have access to talk about fair chance hiring, educating, change management, teaching organizations about risk management and really how to implement fair chance hiring, not just talk about it like many organizations do. And so it was really an opportunity for me as a justice impacted person 4 years after, actually 2 years at the time, after serving 24 years in prison, 10 of those in solitary confinement, to get on the stage and utilize my voice to be able to bring others along. So you asked the question about what barriers I faced. Part of the reason that I'm in this work is I walked out of prison on June 3rd, 2019 in Oakland, California, and was escorted into a 5-bedroom house that had 17 men living in it. And the one room they marched me to had 4 bunk beds in it. And to be quite frankly, it reminded me of prison. And so what should have been the happiest moment in my life quickly became one of the most unhappiest moments in my life because it reminded me of the prison environment. And as I started to navigate my way through reentry, I realized that reentry was terrible, at least out here in California. And luckily I was able to get hired by a legal services organization, LSPC, which many of you know, Dorsey Nunn, out here in California, gave me an opportunity to become an organizer, and very quickly, shortly thereafter, a policy director. I started talking about how could we redesign the reentry system. And, I started to talk to folks at Fitbit and Google and all these other companies out here in Silicon Valley, and really thought about how can we create pathways for individuals, paid internship programs, apprenticeship programs, full-time employment opportunities. And most of the feedback I got from these company executives was around skill development and the lack thereof, and where the gaps were between what was happening in prison versus what had been happening out here in Silicon Valley in the tech industry for the last 25 years. And so I designed in 2020 what I called at the time the Stanford of Reentry programs, and thought about building a campus and a tech training program that would be a year-long to pathway men and women into the tech and knowledge-based economy, because I think that we have a value proposition that's a lot greater than physical labor, which is many of the jobs that we get ushered into. And very fortunately and luckily, Governor Gavin Newsom and the legislature in 2021 wrote me into the budget for close to $30 million to build out this idea. Shortly thereafter, that's when Checker wanted me to come in and build a program and a corporate foundation for them and really be able to evangelize the work, teach others how to do it, and convince as many companies as possible that they should hire folks like us. And so that's what I've been doing the last 2.5 years. I'm driven primarily by the fact that I've been extremely blessed for the people that have surrounded me and provided me space and opportunity. And I feel like that I could not exist as a human being, as a man, as a Black man who's justice impacted, who comes from the inner city of South Central Los Angeles, if I didn't go back and get my homies. if I didn't go back and provide space for the people that are sitting in prison cells right now today and in reentry right now today to kick in a door for them to get a livable wage job. And you know, I want to double down on the fact that I said livable wage, because a lot of people use that any job, you know, analogy, and that's cool. But I'm a big advocate for economic mobility and the opportunity for us to be able to self-determine as we navigate our way back into reintegration.
Thank you so much, Ken, for your thoughtful and just really, really on point answer, right? I mean, most of us who have been through the same experiences, we start this work because we know that there's so many of our homies, as you said, that won't have the same opportunities that we have been blessed and fortunate enough to have. And so we end up leading, right, the efforts and then wrapping ourselves around, but we have to go into these doors. So often people say, well, no, you can't work with them because of those processes, but we have to work with them because of the processes, because people don't see the changes that need to happen unless they have a Ken Oliver, unless they have your Topeka Sam, unless they have, you know, other people who I see that are on this Zoom today, just coming in, because it is so hard. And yes, livable wages are critical. And, you know, we can't start at just, you know, some of us shouldn't have to start at the entry level position because our skill sets don't determine it, right? Like we should really have an opportunity to start based on what we bring, and not just that the record actually will dictate as to what we have. So, you know, I'm incredibly proud of you and grateful for all the opportunities that you are affording so many people through Checker Foundation and just through your own advocacy. And again, you know, we want to lift up Checker Foundation for checker.org for your generous support to Ladies of Hope Ministries and other organizations that are doing similar work, because you also have to put your money where your mouth is, right? You have to invest in the community, invest in this work so we can open up additional opportunities. So thank you so
Appreciate
much.
you.
Absolutely.
And thank you for your work.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
And the question now will go into, since we talked about the systems barriers, what are some program innovations that we see with our courts doing? And so Senior Judge Aiken, this question is for you. As we know, there are significant legal and systemic barriers that impede employment opportunities for justice impacted individuals. Are there any innovative court programs or initiatives that you believe have been particularly effective in aiding the reintegration process for justice impacted individuals, and how widely utilized are these across the justice system?
Dr. Sams, thank you very much for this invitation. I am thrilled to be honored and as a member of this panel, and I was looking forward all day today to hearing what's going on across the country and where I can plug in to be more helpful and plug in some colleagues. I'm going to take a step back. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that I came from the state system. So I was a state court judge for approximately 10 years before I went to the federal bench. It'll be 26 years on February 6th. And I've been a senior judge exactly 26 days. So my experience is really as serving as an active Article 3 with a criminal docket. When I came to the federal system, having been in an innovative state system and having been a juvenile judge where we were attempting to deal with stopping the flow into prisons, I tell people my day job was repairing damaged adults and my free time was given to growing healthy and happy children, either in early intervention programs or in juvenile court programs, but to stop the flow. When I came to the federal system, it was basically people came out of prison. They were given instructions of what they were to do. They would make a mistake because it's overwhelming and the world has changed so rapidly when you've been in custody for so long. They would make a mistake. They would get a slap on the hand. The next step would be perhaps a treatment bed. You know, drug use was the big predominant violation. And the third time they're in front of the judge, in front of me, saying revoke and send them back to prison. So I considered that a failed system, and I still do. What we ended up doing with the help of our district, I wanted success. I wanted better outcomes. And so in 2000, this started back in 2004 and 5, even before that, we built a model program, a reentry program, and launched it and put it out in Oregon. And we used evidence-based practices, which the federal system at that time didn't even know or understand what evidence-based practices were. And when you do that, you take a look at what are the barriers to people coming out and finding success. And where the nexus is between the questions that you've asked and the work that we did is employment, housing, safety for family, mental health, drug and alcohol treatment, and education. Those are all, some of the criminogenic factors that the cause of the recidivation of people in 3 years, 2/3, and in 5 years, 3/4 of people coming out of prison have failed. That's a disaster, and it has been, and it continues to be. So what do we do to make it different? So what we considered to be our strength was judges have a power that they need to use more of, and when we use it, it's extraordinary, and that's the power of kindness and compassion. So what I would tell you is the hallmark of this is people coming out of prison, they have a transition back that makes sense. I mean, I could talk at length. We have a program that we've been working on based in California, and I would love to share the contacts with you. And it's called in California, Redeeming Scholars and Project Rebound. And it's funded by Governor Newsom, and it has to do with putting navigators, formerly incarcerated individuals with educational or training degrees, working with inmates coming out of prison to help move them into either trade school, community college, or a job in a thoughtful way to help navigate that process with a person using people power. And so we actually in Oregon, most recently, we've had a 2-year effort to bring that program into design navigator program for the entire state. So I'm intimately involved in that fight and that issue. And so that's part of the issues. When people are coming out, how do they have a warm handoff to people who care enough to help them through very difficult transitions? Now, what I would tell you is there's the education piece is just as important as getting people a job, because too many people have had educational barriers and are super smart. I mean, I've met some of the smartest, most talented people imaginable in my reentry court program over the last 18 years. And I've run that program for 18 years. Every month, I think I've missed 4 months in 18 years, meeting around a table with high-risk offenders, signing a contract, wanting to have a year in reentry and to address these barriers and these issues. And what I will tell you, it's an individualized based system where we look at the individual and their criminogenic risks. I mean, it's back to risk, needs, responsivity. And then we work to address those barriers, not by taking away services, not by punishing, but by upping support and upping resources. And so what I will tell you is when you do that, you ask a very significant question that we forget to ask in the criminal justice system. Why? Why did that happen? And for most of you, if you're not where I live, which we all have our different issues, but we've had a methamphetamine disaster in this state for the entire time I've been on the bench. So the issue is, why are people using? And they don't even know why. And so we go and start looking at the why and sort people into different programs. And we sort them into, we build community resources, we build capacity. And so when we started this program in 2005, we were like the second program. There was a little program in New York that was very different, but we were the more robust program. And what we learned in the federal system is when people come out of prison, they're under the jurisdiction of the judge who sentenced them. And the court is responsible. And so we could establish a reentry court at the back end. And our goal would be to keep people in the community and strengthen their support and build a network, what I would call an infrastructure of services that would help people remain in the community. So we built relationships with businesses. We built relationships with universities, with trade schools. And I'm going to tell you, some of our best advocates are formerly incarcerated through the reentry court program who've had success. One of the people who I know is on, and she's just texted me, is Christy Lashabur, who is now in New Orleans, but was released to Oregon. She came out, she has an amazing story. Many of you know her. She had an amazing story, and she ended up in a reentry center, the jail, reentry center in Southern Oregon. She's a California woman, and she ended up here because her mother lived here, because that's how we release. And the reentry center director talked her into coming to my reentry court program, and she was never going to tell anybody she had been incarcerated. And she came in and she realized what we were doing was we were meeting with our reentry team. You know, it's a team of the prosecutor, the defense attorney, the treatment providers, probation, the resources that we have in the community, people coming to the table, and we discuss success over the last month. And we look at what's succeeding, what's not working, and we up the resources, and we figure out how to get people through the next month clean and sober and making progress on their obligations under their release status. And she sat in, and by the next meeting she was joining, and by the next meeting I was asking her what was her educational background. And at that point she said, well, she'd worked and had not really gone on to college per se. And basically I think she would acknowledge that it was a little push from me, got her to the university, Southern Oregon University. She started at the community college, fabulous program there at the community college that is a nexus between probation and the court and the university and the community college to help people make these steps happen. And she started there and got a scholarship, moved over to the Southern Oregon University, graduated with honors, did a phenomenal job, stayed working full time, completing all of her obligations, and is now working with a program in New Orleans helping women come out of prison. And she's written a book, and she comes back and is probably one of the most powerful people to talk about what a little help, a little compassion, a little support can do in knocking some barriers. But her best claim to fame is on her own. She decided that the barrier to education was ban the box. And Oregon asked for your status from a criminal standpoint, and single-handedly with a collaboration of people in Oregon and the support of members of the legislature, she single-handedly got ban the box through Oregon, and that is no longer a requirement for education. So I'm saying all that because my goal in setting our reentry court program up was, what skills do we need to help people attain a job, which is a career, a family, a job that will support a family, and it's not just get a person a job and that really can't make it because it's inadequate. How do we help prepare people? So we have a structure of intellect. I do an education evaluation, because many of the people we have are wicked smart, but had problems in education, and we address those, and I have a program related to that. So stepping back, I was really proud of what we put together. I ran it 18 years out of Eugene and 14 years at the same time out of Southern Oregon. Many success stories. The model works, and the ability to set higher expectations for people and to ask them to achieve more, and to give them the support and the confidence. I'm going to tell you, I've never seen such a joyful room as to be in a reentry court session where people are helping one another, whether it's the prosecutor, the colleagues. I mean, everybody weighs in on everybody, and we have changed the culture of what our community's obligation should be to help people come into the community successfully and be our friends and neighbors and co-workers. Now, where are we? There are probably 104 to 114 programs across the country right now. It's grown. It's been judge driven. Courts have seen replication, and I brought this manual. We did this, and is an evaluation. It's a huge how we did the reentry court, why we did it. Melissa Albin read 3 boxes, 3 areas of literature in various academic fields, so that we put the best model up in place. And we finished this report, and we sent it to 3,000, all the districts in Oregon, and all the districts across the country. We sent it a wide range of people. And the FJC, the Federal Judicial Center, had been picking up on this movement by judges and started holding trainings. And from just building these programs, judge driven, wanting better results, wanting to feel more impact in their own communities, we've been building this from the grassroots up. I have contacts in almost every state. If anybody's on there and wants to contact to a judge who's doing a reentry court program, whether it's in Oklahoma, Chicago, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Massachusetts, any of the Ninth Circuit. I can give you the name, and because we've stayed in contact, because it matters. This work makes a difference, and it fills your professional and your privileged position in this job to see people come pay their dues to society and then come out and be welcomed and succeed. I care so much about this work, and as a senior judge, I'm going to be in my community working to help build the service delivery system that needs to be in place for people, and to talk about the stories and to work with my dear friends like Christy and Gunnar Johnson and Randy Shaw, who have been working on the Redeeming Scholars Program, and the academics, that to start telling the story that we are leaving behind people who we need desperately in this succeeding in the communities because they paid their dues. And as a member of this, as a member of the bench, our job is, once those dues are paid, people they need and have the obligation to come back and be supported in the return to their communities. It makes no sense, systemically or cyclically or generationally, to continue this from abuse and neglect and prison and drug abuse as a child, all the way through, the pipeline from cradle to prison. We need to break these cycles, and we need to do it holistically with an array of services and an idea that we are helping people get a job that will support them, their family, and knock down barriers and work individually. Not everybody has to do everything. There are ways in which I would close by saying, what we designed is really a medical model, an idea of finding out where is the issue that is causing the problem? Where's the why? Why does this keep happening? Is it an education issue? Is it a mental health issue? Is it a treatment addiction issue? Wrong program? Is it a family dynamic program? What is it, and how can we get people to the best services? What we need to do in this country is build services, knock down those barriers, and make education the place for people to come out and be inspired to make a difference for themselves and their families. And I'm so proud of the people I've had the privilege to work with. And my days are best spent when I'm around the table with our reentry people coming out of prison who want to make a difference in their lives and are highly motivated. The sky's the limit. I have endless stories, and they're everywhere. And so I think it would be nice, instead of competing for how long you send people to prison, which oftentimes can be the discussion in the criminal justice system, is to talk about how many success stories you have. And frankly, one person at a time. As you know, walking across the beach, you throw one starfish back in the water. That's all you can do. You do the best you can to get one starfish back in. But think if everybody were doing that, how many people will be back in the water swimming towards a different life? So it's been a privilege to be part of this. And I'm hoping in so many ways I can connect up people to colleagues of mine who I think would be inspired to work with and side by side with you.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Senior Judge Aiken. You gave us a lot of information. I see people asking in the chat for the name of the manual. So I know that we'll add some additional links and things after, so people can get the information that you need. I see a few judges who've joined. And also want to highlight, who you spoke about, Christy, who has been in one of our programs, Faces of Women in Prison at Ladies of Hope Ministries. She also works for Operation Restoration, another organization that's led by formerly incarcerated woman, Sarita Stopp, that I sit on the board of. And so again, it goes back to, us supporting one another, right? In order to get the things that we need in order to continue to move forward. And I'd also add that, there are more people in prison who come home who don't want to go back, right? Like, we come home, we want that opportunity. Whether you've been in a day, 3 years, 20 years, you do not want to go back through that trauma again. And it is judges like yourself and others who you'll hear from on this panel that open up these opportunities for people who just need a chance. And I think that, myself and others, again, have been able to do that for each other. But again, it is so important for us to talk about the systems and the judges who a lot of times can make those decisions ultimately on whether or not a person is going to be sentenced, if they get an early termination of sentence, whether it is from, if the law allows, or from early termination of probation of sentence. As you said, it goes back to the judge. So really, really grateful for all of the information that you shared. And I know we'll have a lot of follow-up for you as well. And so we're going to move on to community partnerships, because you highlighted a lot of the partnerships that you are making as a judge, as most of the community-based organizations and other corporations. But Chief Probation Officer Keto Bess, in your work with community partnerships, could you share more examples of how your focus on rehabilitation and community engagement has directly contributed to the successful employment outcomes for those under probation or pretrial services? And what impact have those partnerships with local businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies have you seen had on employment outcomes?
Well, first off, I want to say good evening again, Dr. Sam, and to Judith Negron for inviting me among this distinguished panel. And Dr. Sam, I have to say it's always tough going behind one of my favorite judges, with Judge Aiken. So I'll give it another shot, today. So, one thing I'll say in answering this question, this two-part question, the first part about, focusing on the rehabilitation and community engagement and directly contributed to successful employment outcomes. I think as a probation chief, the first thing that I felt that I needed to look at when I was in New Orleans and in Minnesota was the organizational structure first and foremost, because we're not just trying to put together a program that will fizzle out over time. We're trying to put together programs within our office that's going to last for long-term success for persons under supervision, for people who come into our office. So I think this is highly important that as a probation chief, we first look at the organizational structure. U.S. probation officers, we get involved with the case management for persons under supervision, and some will tell you that they don't have, all of this time, so to speak, to be out in the communities and to enforce orders of the court and to do this and to do that. So one of the things I did was, in talking about this organizational structure, was I created a position that we call community intervention specialist here in the district. And in New Orleans, I created a similar position. And I followed some of the districts such as Nebraska and Eastern District of Missouri, where they created a similar position called community resource specialist. And the whole focus of that as part of the organizational structure was to be able to have a position on staff that can specifically address programs and services and not have to worry about case management. Their case management was centered around the community resources, building those partnerships within the community to be able to bring to the probation office, so that we can have, when persons under supervision are reporting to the office, we can be able to provide that information to them. So, they didn't have to worry about case management at all. And I can tell you, through this community intervention specialists that we've been able to have a lot of success in Minnesota. One of the things that we've been able to do is to first and foremost focus on eliminating the barriers with respect to identification. A lot of people get out of prison and then they don't have identification to be able to go out and even start the process of applying for jobs. They don't have their driver's license. They may not have a social security card. They may not have their birth certificates. And one of the things that we've done through our second chance funds is to be able to use those funds as an opportunity to help folks get those identifications, such as their driver's license, their social security and card, and their birth certificate. I'm very pleased that our community intervention specialist works with a lot of partnering organizations, and recently, as well as a local law firm here, that as well as the Minnesota Collaborative Justice Project, where they recently lobbied with the state of Minnesota to have the laws change, where it made it very easy for people exiting the correction system, whether state or federal, to be able to get their driver's license replacement cards and driver's license information. And that law goes into effect in April. It was just passed last year. So that's just one of the things that they were able to do it. And as Judge Aiken spoke about the reentry court program and efforts, and we also have a reentry court program here in Minnesota. I actually helped to start reentry court in the Eastern District of Louisiana in New Orleans. But we do have a reentry court program here. We work with local partners to help provide mentorships within our reentry court program. And I want to say our U.S. Attorney's Office, our Federal Defender's Office is also, and the court is also involved in that reentry court program. But we also rely on various partner agencies throughout the Minnesota community to serve as mentors. And they too help with trying to address a lot of barriers that impede employment or impede anything that may hinder success with respect to the person's term of supervision. We use second chance funds. We recently partnered with the local truck driving school, trying to take advantage of the truck driver shortage across America. So one of the things we did was we said, you know what, we had a lot of persons under supervision. We inquired from them. A lot of them asked, about wanting to get their CDL Class A license. So as a result, just watching on TV one day, we learned what King School of Trucking was doing out in Burnsville, Minnesota. And as a result, we contacted them. And since then, we've been able to fund persons under supervision. Now, they'll contribute to the cost, but we also, through our second chance funds, we help with that cost to offset some of the fees for the Class A CDL license. So we've been able to do the same thing. And while I was in New Orleans, I actually did the same thing working with the Coastal School of Trucking as well. I would also say, again, that use of second chance fund is like a godsend for us for probation, because it gives us that flexibility to be able to provide these services when persons under supervision and their families are unable to afford those services as well. So in New Orleans, we, helped to sponsor a few folks that went to Delgado Community College, whether it's for any kind of vocational type of program, and also pre-apprenticeship programs. And we have done the same here in Minnesota. And then, also I would add, what one of the things that we did here, and I got this idea from another district, specifically in the Eastern District of Minnesota. We tend to do a lot of resource brokering where we would refer persons here, refer persons there, and they don't always have the funds to be able to travel all across the county, especially if you have a large county, to get here, to get there, and then taking off work in addition to other things that they have to do with treatment services and stuff. But one thing we do know is they have to report to the probation office. So one of the things that we did to help ease that burden of traveling all across the county to assist with employment was we developed in-house a workforce development center. We turned one of our mail rooms into a 9-station computer center where folks can be able to come in to research for jobs, but also to be able to attend workforce readiness programming, financial literacy programming, any kind of programming, cognitive behavior therapeutic programming, where they could be able to come to the probation office. I like to call it a one-stop shop. So when they come to probation, again, the services are here. They can make the time while they're here to attend those programming, and therefore don't have to worry about traveling all across the county. We do provide bus tokens, but again, that's easy to do. But not everybody still have the time when they're trying to fight to work, get other family responsibilities going. So we've tried to do a lot of those things again to help with increasing those skill sets for continued job development. Our intervention team have also used the Workforce Development Center to be able to bring in employers to do what we call these mini job fairs. And we do that in-house. It's something that I repeated here in Minnesota that I did in New Orleans. In New Orleans, we had the opportunity to work with Southern University at one point, and we sponsored a huge career and resource fair at Southern University in their gymnasium. Attended well over 500 individuals. And then we also worked with, at the time when he was mayor, Mitch Landrieu, who sponsored their NOLA for Life program with the city of New Orleans. And we've worked with them in the past also to be able to put together career and resource fairs as well. I talked about the Workforce Development Center, and I've also talked about cognitive behavioral training. And I want to elaborate a little bit on that, because I've always said to folks, it's important that, we, help folks with getting a job, but through the cognition training, changing the way people think is important as well, because we want them to keep a job and we want them to keep it for the long haul. And that's one thing I'll say to Mr. Oliver. I want to add too that I love what you said about any job versus livable wages. And that's something, I grew up in that era, working from state probation to federal probation, where, that was always a say, you got to get any job. You got to get a job. You just got to get a job. No, you got to get a job, but you also, just like me and just like anybody else, we want to be able to progress, within our society, and we want to be able to move up, and we want to be able to, to have livable wages that are coinciding with what's going on with inflation and everything else. So, as probation and pretrial service officers, we definitely want to make sure that we continue to push and we go through workforce development training ourselves to be able to provide that education and transfer that knowledge down to our persons under supervision. And I would also, add with the cognitive training and trying to help in transforming the way people think, I think is also important through our treatment services programs that, I know Judge, has sentenced and placed many people under as part of special conditions, but I also think it's important, again, in trying to keep the job, that we also address needs. One of those things is trauma. And I know I heard the word trauma earlier, and we do, we've partnered with, for example, Dr. Alicia Moreland Capuya out of, she's originally out of Oregon, but she's now at Harvard, and she does a lot of work in this area of trauma-informed care. And I think a lot of this is important because, again, we can just talk about, folks getting employment, but we want to help them with maintaining employment. So we want to focus on their whole being as well. And I think we continue to do that here in the District of Minnesota. And I know many probation officers across the district also engage in that. We have taken advantage in terms of, how do we get this information out with respect to communication? Again, I think information is key. We have relied on a lot, what we call our client emergency notification system. So whenever we get these bulletins, these informations about, countywide, career fairs or any kind of skill-based programming for workforce development, one of the things we do is we treat it like it's an emergency. So we'll set it up in our client emergency notification system so that folks can get the email blast, they can get the telephone robocall, so to speak. They can get, any text messages on their phones, again, because we want to be able to provide them with as much information as possible, as soon as we know it, so that they can be able to go out and, do what they need to do in terms of trying to learn more about those particular opportunities that are out within their community. Again, we engage in ongoing training in-house for probation officers, as well as for persons under supervision, and informational sessions. We do a lot of informational sessions. We've had some that focus just on veterans, for example. We've had some that focuses just on workforce, initiatives and any other initiatives that we see as deemed appropriate. We have transformed our lobby area and a waiting room area into an informational session where we would post things up on our bulletin, as well as have, our a computer area in our lobby area. So if people want to look for employment while they're waiting in the lobby, then they can take advantage of that time as well. And in New Orleans, we had an automated job board at one point, where it was specifically designed for persons under supervision, to research those returning citizen-friendly employers, as Mr. Oliver talked about with his company, Checker Foundation, so that folks, because not everybody we know, not every employers are always genuine in trying to really hire. So we want to make sure we identify those employers to not waste people's time and make people feel like they're giving up because they're trying to look for employment. We try to identify through this vendor. They've identified specific friendly, returning citizen friendly employers, so that we would be able to advise our persons under supervision, people who report to our office. These are some employers that have a history of hiring returning citizens. So these are some individuals that you may want to be able to, get in contact with. With respect to the second part, concerning the impact of partnerships with local businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies, again, we have used them with respect to our mentorship program tied to reentry, and I know Judge Aiken has taught a lot about reentry, so I wouldn't dare repeat what she has said, because ours, we've piggybacked off of Judge Aiken's program and so many other reentry court programs that is in the area. I appreciate in Minnesota them adding this mentorship program, because I think it's been very helpful. And I will tell you, some of the individuals that serve as mentors are our former persons under supervision, people who have graduated from reentry court programs, or people who have gone through the systems themselves, so that they can be able to share real life scenarios and experiences with people who are currently navigating through our reentry court program. I would tell you, we have increased, our success rate with respect to early termination. One of the things I do is I use the programmings as an incentive, and steady employment is one of those incentives. Our early termination rate here in District of Minnesota is about 40%. I don't believe in, keeping people under supervision the whole entire time if they don't need to be. If they have done what they need to do, and literally, continue to be successful in their supervision, in their livelihood, then they should be rewarded, at some point. So, again, we've look at so many options, and the last thing that I'll say, with this is our partnerships in the past with the Eastern District of Missouri and St. Louis. One of the things I want to bring them up specifically is because they modeled something that has not really been done before, and that is they modeled an example by basically hiring a person under supervision to assist with this type of programming. And we can't say ask other folks to hire persons under supervision, or formerly persons under supervision, and then we're not willing to do it. And that's one thing I can appreciate about the Eastern District of Missouri. They talked the talk, and they literally hired someone, and he still works there to this day, and he's very successful at it.
Thank you so much, Chief Best. All the information you gave, I think, gives a lot of great context for the rest of the country and people who are listening on how probation and parole officers can be supportive and helpful. I mean, I think there is a theme here that there are so many barriers that people face, but without the right support at every step of the way, we're going to have people that are, unfortunately, will just continue to go in and out of the system. And so, again, there are some questions that are coming up in the chat. I see them, but I'm going to move this along because we have two more incredible panelists left to share some thoughts, and I want to make sure that we get them in so we don't lose the conversation. And so next up, I have human rights attorney and former honorable mayor Jessica Jackson with the human rights perspective. So just many of these legal barriers end up becoming an infringement upon fundamental human rights, such as access to equitable employment opportunities. Could you speak to some of these current laws and policies that disproportionately affect justice-impacted women on probation and parole at the national and state levels, and what reforms are necessary to address these infringements?
Yeah, so I'll just give you a little bit about the landscape. You've got 815,000 women who are on probation or parole in America. About 72% of those women have, who are on supervision, have young children. So this is not just impacting the women themselves, it's impacting their families as well. All the research that we've looked at here at the Reform Alliance, where we focus on probation and parole reform, shows us that women who are on supervision, who are monitored more closely, that they're burdened with more or unique requirements, and that they struggle with the fees that they have to pay due to their supervision. In fact, 2 out of every 3 people on probation nationwide are making $20,000 a year or less, with almost 40% of them making $10,000 a year or less. So just struggling to get by, especially when you add in the fact that they've got young children and expenses associated with that. The policy changes that need to be made, there are a ton of them, right? One of the things that we've really advocated at Reform for is looking at the data. We know that the longer you're on some form of supervision, the less the return on the investment, the more likely it is that you're going to be returned to jail or prison, not because you've committed a new crime, but because one of the many, many onerous conditions that are placed on people on supervision has been violated, right? So maybe you're late to a meeting with a probation officer. Maybe you can't pay a fine on time. Maybe you have to leave the county to go pick up your child, right? And don't have time to get permission. These kind of conditions, which normally don't bear any rational relationship to public safety or the crime that was committed or to rehabilitating the person. So that's another area that we've been working on, is trying to get rid of these conditions, right? It's not fair that a judge just walks into a courtroom, and it was refreshing to hear the senior judge talk about her approach, because many times we hear about judges that just come in the courtroom and read off a list of conditions that's a standard list of conditions that really isn't tied to the crime that was committed or the person who committed to it, and certainly isn't tied to increasing public safety, which should always be the goal of the system. So that's another area we've been working to really reduce those onerous conditions. We've also been working on technical violations, right? 42% of our nation's jails and prisons are filled with people who are there for a supervision violation. Many of those are technical violations. So it's not that a new crime has been committed. It's, again, just a violation of one of these conditions. And frankly, when I talk to people about these conditions, you've got folks who, they're having to make a decision. Should they go home to their mom's house for Thanksgiving when they know their brother, who also has a felony, is going to be there, if it means that they're in violation of their probation in doing so, right? Or can they go live on their friend's couch? Because we talked about, right, finding housing is very hard when you're coming home and on supervision. Can they go stay at their friend's house while they're getting back on their feet if they know that person has a felony on their record, right? That means they're violating their probation just to get a roof over their head. Or people who are having to choose between paying a fine or a fee and buying groceries for their kids, right? It's terrible. We've seen instances where a guy was almost returned on a technical violation to prison because he got hit by a drunk driver and was in a coma and missed the meeting with his probation officer. Just horrific stories that show how little humanity is considered in the system by most judges throughout the system and most probation officers. So we've been working hard to get rid of technical violations, or at least create graduated sanctions so that people aren't being returned for years just for technical violation. And then we've also been talking a lot about reinvestment, right? The judge brought this up earlier. I think Ken Oliver brought this up as well. There needs to be a serious realignment of the funding in our justice system that actually will address the underlying reason why people are committing crimes, right? Looking at, a need for mental health services, looking at a need for substance abuse services, looking at a need for economic opportunities, education, financial services. So trying to figure out, how can we save money by not incarcerating people for technical violations or not supervising them for 20 years when we know that, more than 2 years, there's really no return on that investment, and instead direct that money and those resources into actually fixing the underlying reason and helping people be successful.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for all of that information. I do know that I don't even believe everyone understood what you said around 815,000 women, and the fact that, women are suffering with even harsher conditions as relates to probation and parole, or the expectations are harder. And the fact that the average salary is $20,000. I don't think anyone could live on a salary of $20,000, more or less a parent with a child, trying to find safe housing or any livable housing at all. And so to hear these numbers and to understand why each of all of our panelists today here are critical to the work that everyone is doing in order for us, and I say us, those of us who've had criminal convictions, to continue to have a better chance or a fair chance, or one chance. Often some people I hear say they never even had a chance to begin with. Is so important. And I know, Jess, has run. Not only is she the honorable former mayor and human rights attorney, but she is a mom so of a young child. So whenever you have to drop off, we do understand. But thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. And we're definitely here to help and also to support our people. I want to make sure Sheena has an opportunity to share her thoughts, and then go into some Q&A, because I see there are about 100 messages in the chat. And so hopefully we'll be able to get to some of them. And Sheena, we talked about right earlier when I mentioned through your bio that Clean Slate Initiative has already impacted over 15 million people across the nation who became eligible for full or partial record clearance. What are the biggest challenges you face when it comes to implementation of these laws, and how much oversight is due to ensure that the benefits that you are intending to are actually happening?
Yeah. First, Dr. Sam, I want to thank you for having me as a panelist today involved in the Clean Slate Initiative, and always lifting up stories of women like myself who have a conviction or arrest on their record. I'm going to answer that question about implementation, but I want to make sure folks, the audience, because I know it's a mixed audience, you have a great mix of folks on the call. I want to make sure they understand what Clean Slate does. So as folks know, and I can quickly go through this, just about every state has some sort of mechanism that allows you to get your record cleared through a petition-based process. It's very bureaucratic. It's very costly. It's very frustrating, and you just relive trauma going through that process, trying to get your record cleared so you could get employment, housing, and even education. And what we've been able to do with the Clean Slate Initiative is automate that process in states where we've been able to pass legislation. There's been over 12 states that have enacted clean slate policies. So essentially what that is doing is removing the burden off the person to go through all those steps and hoops, and that once they are eligible and they remain crime-free for a certain period of time, and the state say they're deemed to get their record cleared, it automatically wipes away. I always tell people, think about when you got something on your credit and you've been waiting that 7 years for that thing to drop off. You know that in that time that your record get cleared. Now, going to implementation. I always tell my team and the coalitions that are working to pass Clean Slate that this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. When we get a Clean Slate law passed in the state, that's just the beginning. It could take 1 year or more to get a state law, to get a Clean Slate law from the governor's desk to implementation. And so in order to get Clean Slate automatic record clearance, the state must be able to gather the data, history records to determine which individuals qualify based on the state law and how it's written. And we often see that states have different ways of housing this information, which can take time to just gather together. And so once states do have the necessary information to proceed with automation, then they have to have a system that can read the data and automatically clear or expunge the record that are applicable. So our partners at Code for America often work with government agencies to find a way to use their existing systems or build a system that is used for implementing clean slate laws. The third component that we see that sometimes is a challenge is this of successfully implementing clean slate is the notification piece while still being developed. So if people don't know that their records are automatically clear with clean slate, and they don't know that they no longer have to check the box for employment or housing, it defeats the purpose of us working to remove those barriers and the stigma that people face when they have those records. So this step involves a lot of pieces, such as working with organizations like your organization and grassroots organizations, directly impacted organizations on the ground, moving pieces like public education campaigns, our state coalition partners holding clinics and awareness campaigns, and working to encourage our state agencies to continue to do their part to ensure that people are aware that their record have been cleared. So a great example, I'll kind of end with this, a great example of implementation and the challenges that are still taking place. Michigan clean slate law went into effect last year, April 1st. 1 million records were cleared on day one of implementation, and 400,000 people saw their records completely sealed 10 days later, right? But for people who was eligible for the automatic clearance, expungement under the clean slate law, they did not get notified that their record was automatically being expunged. So it was recommended that people proactively check in on their record status by using the state record system. And I would just say this, the clean slate laws are working. They're helping people get back to work. And I quickly share a story of a sister named Elvina, who was at the press conference with me on implementation day. And she shared her story that for 18 years, she has been locked out of employment, even volunteering at her child's lunchroom. And she had a degree and a financial degree, and she will always get to the last interview, stakeholder interview. And when her record would come up, it will hold her back, but she was always well qualified, the most qualified applicant. Well, she reached out to me after a clean slate happened. She's like, Sheena, oh my God, my record is clear. They can't find my record anymore. She said, now I have to go find a job. And, you know, we kept encouraging her. And I would say that she's been able to not only get gainful employment, she was able to get a job at a state college or university. And since then, she's been able to get promoted. And so these are the stories that we're hearing from the field, how a clean slate could remove those barriers and get people back to work. And so I just want to say to the workforce folks on the call and the business folks that are attending your call today, that this should not be a workforce issue, because there are 70 to 100 million people like myself and others who have an arrest or conviction that are ready to go to work. We just got to remove those barriers.
Thank you so much, Sheena. And you are doing that through Clean Slate. Reform Alliance is doing that through all their probation and parole work. And as we've heard, Senior Judge Aiken and Chief Bass are implementing some incredible opportunities for people who are going through the system and coming from the system, and companies like Ken and myself, who are hiring people with convictions and continuing to open up opportunities where we're looking at even different practices to encourage other employers to do so. So while, legislative things have to change, to your point, Sheena, it isn't about that, right? Like, we also have to think about, morally, ethically, spiritually, it's just the right thing to do. Everybody deserves to have another opportunity. We've all, made a mistake, whether how big or how small it may have been, but when a person has paid their debt, and that is whatever the court deems, that a person should have an opportunity to come back out and to rebuild their lives. With livable wages, with opportunities that they can also be proud of. And so I'm really grateful for each and every one of you and all of the information that you were able to give this evening. But I do see that there are some questions. So we're going to go over to Q&A. And I'm not sure if Judith or Starling or anyone from my team are going to jump in, or okay, there's Judith. Great.
Here I am. So our first question goes out to Sheena. Can the clean slate laws be implemented at the federal level? Or is that something that's being worked on?
Yes, thank you for that question, whoever asked that. We are working. There is actually a bill that we have that we're supporting. Is a bipartisan bill called the Clean Slate Act. So I encourage folks on the call to call your member of Congress and ask them to co-sponsor that. And essentially, that would create a mechanism on the federal level for people to apply to get their records cleared for eligible offenses, and then that be automatically cleared. So right now, the only way to really get your record addressed on the federal level is through a pardon. And so we're trying to create a mechanism that folks are able to go to get the record cleared. So we're working on it now.
Great, thank you for that. We have another question of the audience, and this one goes out to Jessica Jackson. Any programs to support the women and their children, like housing and childcare, to try to keep the family unified when they're struggling to work at minimum wage or other low-level jobs?
Well, Jessica, as I shared earlier, had to go in order to help with her family. But I can answer that question. There obviously are programs throughout the country, that Ladies of Hope Ministries to be one of them, that provides housing opportunities, and programmatic work through our Grow with Google work, and other programs that we offer for children and men, and families who are impacted by incarceration. I think each state, whether it's through probation and parole, through the Reform Alliance, or through just a network, any of our organizations are happy to tell you, depending on where you're from, what local organizations are there that can help you with additional resources. And if there are any work that we do in any of the 34 states where we impact work, where we can help you as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. And this one goes to Chief Keto Best. Any data on job placement rates for the people that go through the workforce program that you're involved in?
We presently do not have data that we track where that's concerned. I will say though, in terms of our employment rates, we do track, and in the District of Minnesota, I can't speak for other districts, but in our district, our employment rate is nearly 80%. We typically hovered anywhere between 80 to 85%. COVID kind of set us back a little bit, so we're kind of rebounding at this point.
I'm also going to, if I can really quick, Judith, I wanted to make a comment. I saw some, I guess, not really questions, but comments more about restitution. So through restitution, we actually, Ladies of Hope Ministries, also sponsored and supported by Reform Alliance, to doing a campaign called Remission Now. If you go on our website, thelohm.org to Remission Now, you'll be able to see the work that we're doing around that, to learn more about, the barriers that restitution has, the FAR Act, which is an act that we are introducing also into legislation, and hopefully to get passed, to change some of the barriers specifically around restitution for people with convictions. And so we are aware that there are huge liabilities with people who have convictions that also include restitution, and we are working on that. So I just wanted to address that because I saw a few comments pop up about that as well.
This one is for Senior Judge Aiken, and it's more like resources, and perhaps we can put something like this at the end. But what is the name, the title of the manual that you presented, and what information from judges or contacts that you have in Northern Virginia, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Southern District of Florida, Georgia, Chicago? Everybody wants those contacts.
So Sarah Ellis is the judge I'd recommend you make contact with in Chicago. Very dear friend of mine. She has a fabulous program, and there are a number of judges on that bench who are part of that program. The Northern District of Virginia does not have a program, but the Eastern and the Western districts both have programs. I did a little just updating, and there are 140 specialty courses or reentry courts across the country. I'll look and go back up I didn't see about Oklahoma. I'll look that one, the judge I know who's down there up. I was looking, blah, 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 blah. I will be happy to provide the listing of courts. I can get that and it can get disseminated perhaps to everybody who signed up. That's one. And number two, I would be more than happy if people had my work email, and that can be provided in the chat. And I will figure out how to get a online version of this is an old document because it was prepared when we first put the program together, and we've done some updating, but it just explains why we did what we did and how, and it's, clearly it's a starting place. It's not where we are today because, just like Chief Best said, we use trauma-informed approaches that has evolved. I can't even tell you how great it is to get to work with Dr. Alicia Moreland-Capulia. She's amazing. So what you do is it's a model about building programs. And when you have had no system in place for reentry that's wraparound cohesive medical model like this, the style of public policy development is put it up in place and then fine tune it with the needs of your people. So, you want to be working with either something like the Federal Judicial Center that does training and brings, communities together, learning from one another, or, with a research university or medical school, so that you're really addressing a number of the issues that people need more sustained help with. The sad thing is we underfund probation. What we do is we their probation officers, they don't have the time to do this kind of work. They don't have the breadth of resources for the services. And having Second Chance Act money became a godsend to be able to fill gaps, gaps that were costing people their ability to stay safe and in the communities. And that's just such little money. To have a bigger system of resources and to actually sit down and meet people's needs and what I would call it's risk, need, responsivity. And what I believed in was acute responsivity, so that you didn't wait for time to pass or an appointment. You built enough of a strong relationship so that the person would immediately ask for help. And we actually designed an app, a very sophisticated app, so that it was an incentive app to stay in contact, because in between we would have people who had needs, and we built enough trust that they would ask us to help them. And so what we were able to do is that acute need, respond immediately. And so I really believe in using technology, better supervision with technology, and accessing and keeping that information. I mean, how many times already the question's been asked, what's the data on this? And we don't keep it. So there's lots of ways to use technology. We designed what we called it was a crim bit. I laughed about it because what it did was it said, okay, here are your appointments. You didn't have to call in a hotline or a color line for a UA. You were given your thing, and they pushed out the notices to you. You could talk to your probation officer. There was a camera that, you could say, hey, I'm late because there's a car accident here. That can be verified. There could be a video done. There's so many ways of using technology in a smart way and empowering people in their very busy lives, especially when they have unbelievable demands coming back in to rebuild their family and their lives. And the trade-offs of, are you going to get incarcerated or sanctioned for this choice or that choice? The level of stress we place on people only increases the trauma that they have experienced throughout their lives and through incarceration. So again, you're more than welcome to give people my email, and I'd be happy to try to get this document out to people. And I keep a reading list. I read widely, voraciously, on all sorts of academic fronts and where things are. And I think that reading has informed a lot of the ways in which we've approached some of these issues, because what we want to do is build resiliency and what I would say is recovery capital. And so our goal is to build those two things in a way that we can give people the confidence that when they're off supervision, they know how to solve their own problems and they're not afraid to ask.
Judge, if I could add to, because I saw in the chat they were asking about Southern District of Florida. I would just add that the Southern District of Florida does have a reentry program. It's called Care Court. I believe at the time it was ran by Judge Patricia Seitz and Donald Graham. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but if they contact the local probation office in the Southern District of Florida, they can get more information involving Care Court, as well as in Chicago, the Northern District of Illinois. They do have a court as well. If they contact the the probation office or the pretrial office for that matter, but I believe the probation office for sure, they can get information on those two courts.
I would tell you also in Florida, and I don't know what districts, I don't recall, she's in Pensacola, Casey Rogers. Casey Rogers is a phenomenal district court judge. She was out. I mean, I think I had 60 different districts come to Oregon. She came out and they modeled their program in Pensacola, and she's a good contact. But in Chicago, you want to talk to Sarah Ellis. She's the judge that really has led the reentry program, along with a number of others who she manages the team. In fact, I'll see her Saturday. We'll be together. We've been doing some work together. In Chicago, they model their program similar to the way we run ours in Oregon.
Great, finally, thank you for that. And last question is for Ken Oliver. Does Checker work with employers in trying to work through those background issues when they come back negative?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Checker has a couple of different great features from a product perspective. As a tech company, they have a candidate portal. So they're the only company that allows when negative background checks get flagged, they allow the candidate to actually submit a story to the company, and we deliver that to the customers on the business side. And then we also have a product called Assess, where we work with customers every day to filter out charges. So for example, if you have a company that wants to be a fair chance employer and they want to start with low-level misdemeanors or low-level felonies, we have product stuff that can help them filter out all that stuff, so that stuff never comes up on the background check when they receive the application. And so there's kind of two different ways to approach it. Like there's the clean slate way where you make the record go away, but then there's still the challenge of having to explain employment gaps of 10, 15, 20 years in many cases. And so the thing surfaces. I tend to really push more on change management and education at the corporate level. Like, how do we open up and diversify the employment pool? How do we fold this into our DE&I and J strategies? I mean, when you have 80 million people who have some form of a record, and you're excluding those people wholesale, that's not really an inclusion strategy. That's an exclusion strategy. And so I think normalizing the narrative is also a very effective way for us to get companies to open up, their livable wage positions and up and down the corporate ladder in the corporate space. So yes, we do work with our customers, some of the biggest companies in America, on educating them primarily around what it means to have a record and what it doesn't mean. Because oftentimes it doesn't mean anything. It's all a narrative that we spent in our head about something after we watch an episode of Dateline or America's Most Wanted or something. And so we do that. And we work very closely with candidates to do expungements. We work very closely with candidates to help pathway them into our customer employment portals, et cetera.
Judith, may I say something? What I want to tell you with reentry court programs, I've and there was a question about meeting with how to work with employers. Do you know how positive it is to go to? I've gone to employers, and I've gone to we've had meetings where we brought in employers to say, most of the time people want to work, and if you give them a job and they're capable of doing it, they are going to go as hard as they can to do good work for you. But where they may have problems are there other parts of their lives that are in having difficulties. If they're in a reentry court program, not only are we working with them, but we're addressing some of those other issues that could cost them a job in the workplace. And we work collaboratively. And so we've been able to, work in pairs to get people into really good jobs. And it's sort of like having a support as they're making this transition into a better position. And I remember specifically, I'm laughing, Mr. Oliver, because I had a woman who had a charge, and she had a disability, and she had a job as a janitor with a major corporate local grocery store. And I really asked, if somebody's in my reentry court, I make them tell their employers about their background. I just think that's, putting things transparent and teaching people that they deserve an opportunity is the best way. And so she was terrified she would lose her job. And I learned that their HR policy was if any felony, they were fired. So I made an appointment and went to met with the owner, and we told her the story that we were afraid she'd lose her job. She'd owned a house. She had a cat. She took care of her mom. She was disabled. She was very proud of what she's done. Her offense had nothing to do with anything about money. It was just a different story. And he looked at me and he said, I think you could be a big help, because two people that I hired without knowing any of this, I just had to fire because they embezzled a lot of money. And I could have used some help with these folks for some of their other issues. And we built a good relationship, because if they were in reentry and there were problems, there were people to help solve some of those non-work problems. And getting a job where you feel like you're welcomed in is such a boost to people. I just think more probation offices and courts can build that network. And what a lucky break to have you working and doing what you're doing in California. It's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit it right on the head, is normalizing this through storytelling. The more we show the Tamikas and the Sheenas and everybody else, and we show what our value proposition is, all of a sudden, some of these, things start to melt away. And someone said earlier, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Rest in peace, Nipsey Hussle. Very true. Like, struggle is protracted. We're still dealing with institutional racism, which is a 400-year-old problem in this
Yeah.
country. We're still dealing with DE&I issues, which is 60 years old. We're still dealing with women's reproductive right issues in this country at the Supreme Court and in society. So we have to bear down and be ready to like get in the trenches long term. It's not all going to happen, but we got to constantly knock on the door, kick on the door, share the stories, convince folks, have convenings like this. Thank you, Dr. Tabika Sam and Ladies of Hope Ministries for doing this kind of work. And slowly, each one teach one. And the more we get people in, it's our responsibility to go back like Harriet Tubman and grab another and make way. And that's
Yep.
what we're doing today.
One of my best employers who takes people all the time and calls, when I had told somebody they'd had a great job and they got a big promotion, I figured out that where they were working, and I said, do they know you have do they know your criminal background? And he looked at me like, what? And I said, you need to tell them, and you need to tell them by Friday. And he looked at me and he texted one of the other reentry people as he left. And I said, and if you want, I'll go with you. And so the probation officer and I met at his business place of business, and we just said our names, and we met in the conference room with the owner, and I knew the owner, and the three of us are in there, and she walks in, and we look at her, she looks at us, and she said, James, what's this meeting about? And he said, well, on my resume, when I was interviewed, nobody noticed or asked why that 17-year gap in California and what I was doing. And I was in incarceration. I was locked up, and I was in federal incarceration. And she interrupted, looked at me. She said, oh yeah, you're Judge Aiken. And we sat there, and she said, I'm going to have to, work on this. But she has repeatedly hired people and it was such a monkey burden, weighted down concern. He just was so worried he was going to lose everything, and transparency really made a difference. So the more we can actually normalize, the better.
Well, I thank everyone on the panel. I think we had a kind of a closing question, but I believe that Ken had really summed it up when you think about how are we advocating, right? How are we also aspiring other advocates to come in this space, right? To normalize what's happening, to give the conversation. I mean, it would be great, I always say in a perfect world, it would be great that there are Judge Aikens in every state, and that they will walk into a job with the person with the conviction and be able to sit down and have that type of support where an employer won't say no, right? Because the judge is sitting with that individual.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
But unfortunately, we don't. So that's why like this legislation with Clean Slate Initiative is so important. There is the opportunities like we're seeing with Reform Alliance and the legislation they're doing. There are the changes that's happening through the background check system that Checker is doing. And then there are programs around workforce development, around emotional and cognitive therapy and health. That not only Ladies of Hope are doing, but even Chief Best is doing, right? So it takes a community of everyone in their respective areas to continue to raise the issues that we're facing. And there are so many coalitions that are out here that are committing to fair chance hiring. But for those of us who are actually on the ground doing the work, we are getting qualified applicants and talent who have, degrees that range up to judge. Their last job before incarceration was a judge, and they still cannot get employment. And so just continuing to work together, have these conversations, erase the stigma, understanding, I believe I heard Sheena say 100 people with 100 million people with an arrest record in this country. Like, they say it's 1/3, but I'm like, that's everyone. And so if we realize that there is someone that that has had an arrest or criminal conviction, and that the only way to make sure that our communities are safe and that we all have healthy lives, we have equitable opportunities, we have living wage employment for ourselves and our family, is to unlock these barriers and continue to support. And so, again, I want to thank all of our esteemed guests for being here, for taking out the time, for answering these questions in such a thoughtful and expansive way. Typically as I'm moderating panels, I'm kind of interjecting, but you all had so much great information to share that I just sat back. And I love that because I think that the listeners and viewers have an opportunity to really take some great takeaways from this. And so I invite you all to partner with the Ladies of Hope Ministries Pathway for Equity program to continue to help us to advocate for equitable employment. So if you are a business, consider being an employer partner, corporate sponsor, or provide your staff experts for talent development. If you are a reentry organization, we invite you to collaborate with us to expand our reach with helping women find career pathways with livable wages, benefits, and growth opportunities. This is only the beginning. There's much more to discuss here. And so we invite you to attend our next 2 business roundtables, which will be around employer barriers to equitable employment and success stories in career placement. So we will use the contact information that you provided us when we receive the invitation. When you receive the invitation, please share it with your network. Let's continue to work together to dismantle these barriers to fair and equitable employment for justice-impacted individuals.
Thank you. Thank you.